But the visual piece was from Jolene Armstrong, the title Sunflower Cosmos. And Rachel, that was one of your selections. So
Yeah.
really, like out of the pieces in the issue, if you wouldn't mind just throwing out there, like what made that one stand out to you?
Sure. Well, I mean, some of it is sort of obvious, and taking your lead, obviously, it was. I'm commenting strictly subjectively, on the pieces I chose. But what spoke to me first was that I was sort of drawn into the center of this very detailed piece, and my eyes visually, I got sort of lost, happily lost in the details of it. So it actually took me, even though the title of the piece is Sunflower Cosmos, it took me a minute to realize I was actually looking at a sunflower, because I was so lost in the beautiful sort of cellular, molecular-like detail of the piece. I really, it sort of reminded me of a lot of things. One is, just an overall commentary on perspective, right? How, we can get so lost in the details of our own, lives that you have to remind yourself to sort of step back, and there's always another perspective, right? We're always looking at things through our own distorted lenses. The lenses of our experience or where we're standing or whatever. And then it also reminded me of sort of how the detail is very organic and cellular looking, and how the sort of the geometry and patterns are, repeated in nature. And I know there must be a word for that. I just don't know what it is, where you have like, sort of like the irises of your eyes, the lines in the irises of your eyes also look like sort of branches of trees and things like that. This obviously reminded me of, sort of a Milky Way kind of thing in space, right? Which this alludes to the word cosmos in there. And also, like I said, cellular type shapes, molecular stuff, as if you're looking at things through a microscope. So yeah, off the top of my head, those are my initial thoughts. And then just visually, the colors I thought were just beautiful. I mean, put simply. So, and yeah.
Yeah, great. Anybody else want to throw something in there with that piece?
Yeah, the phrase that came to me looking at it was the world in a grain of sand. This idea of the micro and the macro being so similar, like you pointed out, Rachel. And I think there probably is a word for that, similar forms of nature, but I've always been fascinated by that. And because you just see it everywhere. And those repeated forms. And, again, like you said, Rachel, I too started out looking, because of the title too, Cosmos, I was looking at it as, and all the pieces around it, there's so much in this issue, and especially in that section having to do with stars and skies and that whole theme. And so at first, I too didn't even realize I was looking at a sunflower, but it was just gorgeous. And too, the cycles of life apparent in there because of the element of apparent decay that may be going on with the sunflower at the same time, that sense of earth that comes in with the seeds and everything. Yeah, I thought it was a gorgeous piece. So thanks for picking that one out.
Oh, good. Yeah. Yep. It's it is really validating to hear that you're seeing some of the same stuff. And I hadn't considered, of course, how the cycle of life stuff comes into play there, and of course fits in with this part of the journal. That's cool.
When the very first time I saw it, I had no idea what to expect. I wasn't even sure if it was going to be a visual piece or if it was going to be written text. So I had zero preconceived notions. And I have to admit, my very first gut reaction was a little creepy. got kind of an H.R. Geiger alien feel, the little egg, which of course gets you into a lot of sexual territory, and
Yeah.
also brings you back to birth and death and decay.
Yeah.
I don't know why they let me do this, but I was like 23 or 24, and they let me teach an American literature class at a university in Texas that I had no right to be teaching at the time. But I was obsessed with Walden at the time, and so I was, trying to teach them bits and pieces of Walden. And one of the sections I got obsessed with because there was this implication of a mathematical expression in nature. And what I was able to pull out of it was the Fibonacci sequence, or the golden mean. So this the ratio of where the eye occurs on a perfect face. It's this ratio then also gets expressed in the sunflower. If you look at the seeds,
Mhm.
the outgrowth is the same 2-5-1 pattern, which is also what you see in the unspooling of galaxies. So now superimposing that actually makes this similar. It's still a little frightening to me. There's something kind of maybe cosmic horror, I think, because that was my first reaction, was almost a phobic response. But then you kind of superimpose the universal stuff that adds a nice layer where it's still a little creepy, but it's also kind of awesome and inspiring. It's still reminding you that stuff decays anyway. And I also like that it's kind of cut right in half. If you squint, the top half looks like it either might be growing or still in flesh, but then the bottom half kind of is almost a circular pattern of the yin yang feel.
Right. Which also, it also reminds me, if I can add this, that it's, I'm a huge, I had one of my, my first art exhibition was called Liminal Spaces and Nowhere Places. And I'm like obsessed with the concept of liminal space. And, I feel like this issue of the journal, it feels very much like, reflective of liminal spaces. And yeah, I think that piece is sort of like, yeah, is it dying? Is it not? You know what I mean? It sort of feels like it's in transition. So it's cool. It's lovely and terrifying, as the artist Jolene Armstrong says herself, as describing her work.
Sure. Yeah. I didn't see like the yin yang similarity. It is, you can't unsee it once you see it. But yeah, the kind of the lighter side and the darker side of the inner part of the flower. But yeah, if you've made it far enough into the website, there's somewhere in there where I reference William Blake, not the famous world in a grain of sand line, but we're fans of William Blake in terms of the origin story of Wild Roof Journal. That's where I got the name originally. So yeah, that element certainly isn't lost in terms of seeing the cosmos, in this case, in a flower rather than a grain of sand, but similar enough where it's kind of a nice parallel. So yeah, and I was wrong on one of the pieces we talked about last go around with Bonnie Matthews Brock's image. So I'll give this one another shot, and perhaps I'll be wrong again. But it looks digitized. It's not a realistic image of a sunflower, of course, and I'll post it on the website if you're just listening. But that's that kind of cellular, and obviously the colorful nature of it kind of calls to mind like a kind of a digitized image where it's not overdone, where it seems kind of fake and too kind of harsh, but kind of really done in a nice, really an interesting way that really is pretty eye-catching. And what I was even drawn to after a couple of looks at it was kind of the edges and the pattern. The pattern in the center obviously draws your eye in because the circular nature of it and the center of the flower, but just the wonderful patterns into the edges of the piece. Like every part of this image is just kind of gives you more and more to look at. So it kind of has that infinite nature working just in terms of, places to look as a viewer. So I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, very organic looking, although possibly digitized looking, like you were saying, or it doesn't lose that organic look and feel. Very organic.